Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Argon. So with this major combat rework just around the corner, I'd like to show you guys how it would actually impact your character and whether or not you will be reduced in your ability to go ahead and do all the different types of content. So currently I have my Paladin DPS build. This is yes on the live server as it is, and I'm standing with these ratings. However, I will go ahead and buff myself up as I normally would, using my Wildstorm Elixir for crit severity, using my Superior Flask of Potency for crit severity, and using the Watermelon Sorbet for the accuracy and power. So you can go ahead and see that these are my current ratings, and I am by far nowhere near capped out as you should be. And as you can see, I'm way over on the armor pen cap there, and the reason being is because I currently have a build to buff up Exuna so she does maximum amount of damage, from using those indomitable runestones to using those warlord inspirations to buff her damage. I'm using currently 2 of them there. Now this build is by no means whatsoever maxed out. You can see my mount bolster there only being at 43%, and I have no mount collars. Other than that, yes, everything else is pretty much max. Most of my enchantments are radiants, they are rank 15s, and my bondings for sure are 15s, and my indomitable runestones, however, most of them are only rank 14, with 2 of them there being 15. My companions are all at legendary here. However, we do know that these companions will now be able to go to mythic, and I won't upgrade anything. I'm literally going to copy this character directly to the preview server, and we'll go ahead and do some questing within the newest zone, Avernus, where it's supposed to be the toughest. So let's go ahead and actually see what this looks like on the preview server with the changes. And here we are back in the exact same spot as which we were on the live server. And yes, I've invited myself to a guild, as I am on a guild in the live server, so it's only fair that I would be in one then on the previous server. And on the live server I currently had the power bonus, and I had the hit points along with the mount speed, and the rest remains the same. So immediately looking over to my character stats, you can see yes, I am indeed overcapped on power. The new caps now are equal to your item level. Any higher there, you can see you're just wasting those stats. And that is from ratings getting 50%, and the additional other stats you can get up to there, that 90%. And looking over at my buffs, they should be still active. They are indeed, except for the watermelon, which we will go ahead and reapply there. And looking at my inventory, it should be identical as to the one on the live server, except the bondings got put here, as there is no room for them here. And yes, my companions are still all on that legendary rarity that they were on the live server, and I'm not going to upgrade anything. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys exactly what this is like in the newest zone, Avernus. So these are currently my stats, and this is my Paladin DPS build, so we'll see what it's like doing solo content. Fortunately, we now have VIP on the previous server, so we can just use our quick signpost and get over to the Wandering Emporium. 10 years later. So here we are. Now let's just go ahead and drive over to the scab, and we can beat up some demons. Here we are. Now I'm just going to quickly slot some AoE powers there, slot that Bane. This is my general setup for AoE. I should still have all of those buffs and the stats that I had before. We do. And let's go ahead and see how it is to kill these bunch of mobs. And there we go. Now Exuna is not nearly as impactful as she is on the actual live server, but even without her doing the insane amount of damage that she does, we can still kill the mobs with relative ease. However, you can see they're doing a decent amount of damage to me. We'll go ahead to this next bunch. This time we'll use our mount power, and we'll finish off the mobs like that, just there. Now let's go ahead and see how it compares on the live server. Again, these are my stats buffed up, and we'll pop over to Avernus. So here we are. Again, we'll slot that Bane, and let's go ahead and kill this first bunch of mobs as we did exactly on the previous server. And you can see it's pretty much the same. However, you will notice as soon as Xuna does her bloodbath, she can pretty much kill everything. So I'm going to go over here and demonstrate. I'll just hit them once, and Xuna will just go and she'll wipe them out with her bloodbath. She can do a pretty insane amount of damage as currently on the live server. So on the preview server, she did get nerfed a little bit there, and she can't just go ahead and nearly wipe out a full group of mobs like she currently can. But that was to be expected. She was a little overpowered, especially by being able to do more damage than actual player characters. So that's pretty much the comparison. You should not, in fact, feel much different at all. This is the live server. Jumping back to the previous server, we're here. Xuna's getting beat up by a bunch of mobs as they respawn. So let's just go ahead and finish them off. There we go. They're pretty much just as easy to kill with these new changes and the combat rework. And keep in mind, this is not with me upgrading any of my companions. You can see my companion bolster there is 50% because I have 10 legendary companions. And again, with mounts, I only have that 43% bolster and no collars whatsoever. The rest, of course, is pretty much maxed out. And with this gear, I can pretty much do all of the content within the live server as it currently stands. I can do Master Zariel, however, of course, not with this build. I would be using my other builds there with the actual setup for either tanking or healing, not this DPS hybrid, as our DPS pretty badly sucks in single target in long fights. So yeah, with these overall changes, you shouldn't feel much impact whatsoever in the actual power of your character. And with the ability to upgrade companions actually to mythic, you'll be able to actually gain a bit more power than you would before. However, of course, all of these changes, when you go ahead and upgrade stuff and you slot things with higher item level, what's going to happen is your total item level will increase, meaning your hit points will increase, meaning your overall weapon damage will increase. But again, this build, this setup with these maxed out enchantments, maxed out insignias and legendary companions, which are now can be mythic, currently on the live server I can do all of the content, including Master Zariel. And thus there's no need for me to upgrade any further. So until they actually come out with new content that's going to be harder than anything that there is currently on live, there is no need for me to invest anything into this character. There's no need for me to spend anything. I don't need to exchange any enchantments. I don't need to switch out any of my actual insignias or rune stones, etc. I could literally just go with what I have. However, of course, I could do some overall optimization. For example, using this Baphomet set is probably, or this Demon Lord set is probably more penalizing than using a higher item level set, as item level directly increases overall damage. Now, of course, I will have to test out more party content and actually see what things are like. However, we will go ahead and we'll jump into a specific queue there, into one of the epic dungeons, and we'll just test out what it's like. Alright, so here we are. I was just about to queue up to Tomb of the Nine Gods when I got a friend asking me if he wishes to queue up and check out actual Zariel. So let's go ahead and actually queue up to that epic trial and see what it's like with my current tank build. And the challenge is to get him to be able to survive the weight of virtue, as he's currently on just over 600k HP and his defense was only there about 50%, well, just under. I'm going to go ahead and slot in my overload of Bulwark of Brimstone as I would usually do, and I'm going to go ahead and use my Caprice. I use Heroism also if I need to. She hits like bloody hell. Okay, he survived that. So yeah, he deflected that white noise there. So we'll actually see if he can survive without a deflect. So he only just survived that. And yeah, he was able to survive that without a deflect there. But only just. So there we can see the weight of virtue is only doing there about 1.2 million base damage. However, with the new changes to our actual system of how enemies deal damage and how our defensive stats work, it's not surprising that how much damage you would actually take, as defense now is only going to block up to a total of about 47%. That's fully maxed out. So stacking defense isn't going to do a whole lot, and you probably want to just stack as much hit points as possible, and then having the extra buffs and stuff from other people's powers is going to help a lot more. So we'll see what it's like, and Zarya Master is supposed to be the hardest content, so it's got to be challenging, and for us endgame players, sure, well, this is what all the game is about anyway. If we're going to have to spend more to get more survivable, let's say as a tank, or do more damage, then that's how it's going to be. And we can't really complain, as we just get bored of the game when things are just so easy. But as for the rest of you guys who aren't going to be running, let's say, Zarya Master, you guys really aren't going to be affected too much by these changes overall, as they're really not going to impact the amount of damage you can output, or in regards to the amount of HP the mobs have and how quickly you can kill things. Unless, of course, you were being carried by a Xuna or a chicken, which sure did get reduced, but they aren't actually useless now. So going back to my DPS character and how we want to check out the actual Tomb of the Nine Gods. Well, I'm going to have to wait on this chain of scales, which is, in fact, you guys need to know, is bugged and doesn't work. But when it does work, and if it gives that actual 6% awareness, then that's really good for tanks, especially since bosses now have 100% uptime of combat advantage damage. So switching over finally back to my DPS character here, and we're going to test out the initial mobs in Tomb of the Nine Gods and actually see how well we can solo those mobs. Now you can't actually really solo the entire dungeon, as you need people to take those buffs before the first boss, but we'll just go as far as we can see and see what it's like to just beat up those mobs compared to how it actually is on the live server. On the live server, I will admit that I really do rely on Xuna, especially when in those scaled content, and she really does kick ass, as she doesn't really get scaled by her damage. As with these changes, that should now have changed so that they now only gain a percentage of your, let's say, base damage and your main stats. And now with the way scaling works, you should be getting adjusted on your actual base damage and your maximum hit points, and that's it. The rest of your stats should stay the same. So we have our initial few mobs here. They have all their elite HP bars, and we'll see if we can actually kill them off. Now, I will admit, it does take longer than on the live server, and they do a bit more damage, but you can see it's not impossible. And you can see with that scaling, all it's done is reduce this damage down from 4,000 to 2,400, and reduce my HP down from, I believe it was like 600,000 down to 340,000. Now, ideally, I would switch to my Wisps of my Shadow Demon instead of these actual boots that reduce my incoming healing. And if I wanted to solo this a bit better, I wouldn't have. My god, those guys kick ass. Yeah, so these mobs are doable solo, right? But I wouldn't advise it, and I think it's in a decent spot. Now, sure, I'll need to run this more with parties, but you get the point. The mobs aren't overly too challenging if you can use your actual mobility, move around, make sure you get the upper hand on them. They're easy enough to kill. Those snakes, however, are a bit more challenging, as they do a bit more damage. You just want to make sure that they don't flank you to get the extra combat advantage. And Xuna can do her part there. But yeah, these dudes really can do a decent amount of hurt on you. Now, interestingly enough, I've used those potions, and they heal for a whole lot more. You can see they heal for 253,000. That is a pretty nice buff to those healing potions, if I do say so. And I don't believe it's just because of our incoming healing. Yeah, my incoming healing is only 13.2%. If I switched over to that, would that affect healing potions? I don't think it does. But let's check out on the last piece of mobs. And I'm going to end the video here in a few moments. We'll just finish off these guys. See if we can actually, not without getting wrecked. Drink that potion. Yeah, that heals for 250,000. That is pretty nice. especially since we've had to rely on using stones of health to actually heal us any amount, especially when we're on like 600k HP. That healing potion can heal me nearly more than 50% of my HP. So yeah, I'm going to end the video here. Overall, yes, these changes are going to impact your party content. It's going to make it a little bit harder, especially since they've managed to hone in on the scaling and get it right. However, of course, in your endgame dungeons and such, you won't be scaled, so it will still be worth to make character progress, and you also won't be scaled on these percentages, so you ideally want to get those nice and high as possible. But of course your damage and maximum hit points will be scaled. However, in zones and such, you shouldn't feel any impact whatsoever, even with only having legendary companions and only having legendary mounts with barely any bolster, with no collars, etc. You don't need those things to actually complete nearly all the content within the game, especially the solo stuff, the stuff that's meant to be done solo. As for endgame content, I believe they will be raising the ceiling a bit higher and making it so that, yes, us endgame players will have to upgrade stuff to maintain that maximum capabilities within that trials, such as Zariel Master. I believe this will probably only be the most difficult trial out there, as Tower of the Mad Mage probably won't get the buffs and be as challenging as Zariel Master. But we'll have to see. Those things are still being adjusted upon, and I can't really overall test things there just yet, as these changes still won't come out for you guys probably for another month. So we'll see by then. So hopefully this is somewhat insightful as to things that are going to change. Overall, it's not going to have too much of an impact. You will have to make some tweaking here and there. Try and not be fully maxed out on this power and overcapping it by wasting stats on it. Make a few adjustments. Like here, I could just switch out some gear pieces that give me power, like this headpiece and these arms. And other than that, maybe a few radiant enchantments. But we will have an exchange vendor. And myself, I did actually initially in mod 16 get a bunch of bound enchantments, so I'll be able to just switch those around, giving myself better enchantments and more versatility. That's going to be about it. As for weapon and armor enchantments, we'll have to see. Currently, the lightning being there pretty much the best for AoE, and Bilethorn there being pretty much the best for single target. But that's how it was really before for a good while. Vorpal was a pretty all-round weapon enchantment for pretty much everything, but it has been changed, but we can see if we can get it changed back again. People were saying critical severity was just very easy to cap, so they decided they'd change to Vorpal to make it give that critical chance instead. But giving only 4% at rank 15 is just abysmal. But we'll have to see. Hopefully I presented this well, and if I did, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing. And we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.